about that. So, but it's good to be back. Betty is going to wait till Friday to call herself clean. She's a little bit more, has a little more anxiety about it than me. So, I said that we were going to be doing a sprint the first week. Well, okay, what's beyond the sprint now? I don't know, but we're gonna do a lot tonight. So, but it should be fun. But let's pray, and then we'll get going. Father, thank you for this world. Thank you for our life in it. Everything that we have comes from you. And for those of us that love you and are called by your purpose, we want to strive to honor you in all that we do in this life and in this world, with our speech, with our behaviors. And so that's why we're here together tonight, just to learn about ourselves, to learn about this world that we live in. And I would pray that you'd give me clarity so that we can really learn how to engage this world. So would you send your Spirit to engage with us, enlighten us to the truth of your word and the truth about this world, the way that you see it, and help us to see it that way. We pray in your name. Amen. Okay, so for sure we're going to do two things tonight. We are going to look at some basic concepts of worldview, and there's 12 of them. And we're going to take then these 12 concepts, and this is a rubric that we're going to use for every other worldview. So hopefully tonight we'll get to some of the Christian worldview, but we'll use the same rubric to look at and evaluate all these different worldviews. The second thing we're going to try to get to tonight, and I think we will, is the sheet that you picked up back there, specifically some theological concepts only toward Christianity. And then we will build on those as we come back to the Christian concepts, either at the end of the hour tonight or next week. Okay? Now, if you have questions, ask them. Interrupt me and put your hand up. Because here's what worldviews do. They build. And theological concepts build. Ideas build upon a priori, the things that come before it. So if you're not getting this first one, don't let me go to the second one until you understand the first one. Okay? That deal? Okay. All right. So let's start looking at this. There's a few things. Every worldview, again, a worldview is, let me just use it this way. It's like a pair of glasses that we put on, and now, right now, my world is a mess because these are cheaters. Now, if I take them off right now, you guys look great. But I'm still cheating because I have contacts in. Okay? If I take my contacts out, I can't see you. But then I don't need these for reading. So my worldview is looked through my contacts and or my cheaters. Okay? So if I come over to this computer, it's really blurry. Now my worldview has just changed because now I can see it, now it makes sense to me, I can understand it, okay? A worldview is a set of beliefs that we all have that when we look at, namely, as we saw a couple weeks ago, three things: the world, God, and our relationship with those two things. Our worldview dictates how we see those three things. So I listened to a 1-hour talk today on a buddy of mine I went to seminary with. He's Russian. He grew up in Moscow. And when he was 28 years old, he met a girl. That girl led him to Christ. Now, he was atheistic until he was 28 years old. And he was sharing today just what it was like to grow up there. He did not see a Bible till he was 28 years old. Never saw a Bible. And he's a great friend of mine. He's been trying to get me to go to, he goes to Russia every 6 weeks for 3 weeks and then comes home. And in 6 weeks, he does that 12 months a year. And he teaches in the university. He has written curriculum now. It's called religious culture. It's not religion. He has written textbooks for the public schools and the public universities under the auspices of religious, religious culture. Now, his whole life was skewed by one thing. There is no God. So the way he interpreted the world was through one belief. There is no God. There is no creator. We are all animals. His grandfather died in the Battle of Stalingrad because he was fighting for, he didn't want to, but he was pulled into because the government said, this is what you'll do. Did you guys grab one of those back there on the... I'll get them. Okay. So his viewpoint of the world was skewed through atheism. And so therefore, because there's no God, there's no creator, so therefore, we're animals. Therefore, in communism, if you're not helping me, I can just get rid of you and replace you with a bigger, stronger, faster.
Is this the same as
No, it's not. No. So that's what our worldview does. Every worldview has common elements, and that's what we want to look at now. Okay, number one, as we look at the rest of our time together, as we look at different worldviews and or religions, we're going to ask the question, what is the source of their truth? Okay. Now, you typically have two choices. There's some sort of sacred scripture. So, a little test here. What would be the source for Christianity? Bible. Sacred scripture. How about Islam? Quran. What is it? Sacred scripture or human document? Okay. That's what you say. We'll find out that's not what they say. Okay. Jehovah's Witness. What's that? It's a Bible. It's called the New Translation, the Living Translation. Okay. It's different than, in a sense, the Orthodox Bible. How about atheism? They do have a source. He's important to them, but he's not their source. Their source typically, there's 3 different copies during 3 different periods of time. The 30s, the 70s, and then I think 2013 was the last time. They rewrote a document called the Humanist Manifesto. And it literally reads like, I grew up in a Baptist church, and we had the 12 Articles of Faith. And I'll give you guys copies of this when we get there. They have articles of belief. Okay, that's their source. Everything is critiqued within that. Okay, all right. All groups answer the question of theology. You guys know what the term theology means? Okay, it's a study of the theos, so it's the study of God. Okay, now every group, and this may surprise some of you because it typically, it always does when I teach these subjects. Atheism has a theology. My son and I we used to go to the Humanists of Minnesota up in Columbia Heights. We used to go there to their monthly meetings. And I still remember the very first time we went. We walked in, and there were probably 150 humanists, and me and my son Mitch, who was a theology guy at Bethel at the time. We were the only 2 without a Bible. They had a professor from the University of Minnesota there that night, and that's why we actually went, talking about the historicity of the Bible. And so his whole goal was to prove that it wasn't a historical document. It was like 2:30 in the morning before my son and I got out of there. They couldn't believe we came. We sat around, we talked. They had cake and pie. It was like being at a church potluck. Okay? They were doing theology that night. Atheists. Okay. Buddhists. Do you know what kind of theology they have? Believe it or not, Buddhists are atheists. They do not believe in a God. Hinduism does believe in a God. It's a different God. There's, depending on who you talk to, there's 330 million or there's 3. They have a thing that looks like the Trinity. Okay? So every group tries to answer the question, is there a God? Okay, that's the existence issue. Is there one? Second one, if there is, what is that God like? Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 2? Is it 330 million? Does it have gender? Is it intelligent? Does it love? Did it create? You have all these types of things to talk about if you come down on the side that there is some sort of God figure. If there isn't a God figure, so for atheism, for example, it's a very quick study of their theology, okay? Because there isn't one to study, okay? A very, very important, and if you want to highlight this on your page, this is incredibly important. If you come down, if you're looking at a religion, and they say they have some sort of God, has that God communicated, and specifically to people? Now, if that God has not, then it's no big deal. Okay? But if that God has spoken or revealed itself or himself or herself in a particular manner, either through visions or books or whatever, then it becomes important to find out what that God says. Because if I am accountable to it, I need to know. Okay? So it's that question is very important. Has Brahman, some of you heard the guy pray in the Chamber of Congress the other day, and he said, and I pray this in the monotheistic name of Brahman. Well, it's technically not monotheistic, but Brahman is this God force in Hinduism. But it has not spoken because it's not a person. Okay? So that's a very, very important question. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay. Oh, did I? Oh, where'd 3 go to? Oh, I must have my numbers mixed up. Okay. The next section that every group has some thoughts about is the idea of biology. Where did everything come from? Okay? Now, you typically have the first one. This is what we call the teleological argument. It's basically an argument from design. So I go, okay, here's some Crystal Light diet stuff. Most people, and especially the monotheistic religions, many other religions, look at this and go, you got a container, you got some liquid, you got ice, somebody put this together. That's a teleological argument. I'm arguing because of the design of this, somebody had to make it. Okay, that's what teleological argument means. So creation would fall into that from a Christian point of view. We look at creation, you know, Psalm 19 says that the sky and the stars cry out of a creator. There's all sorts of speech, but there's no voice. Okay? We believe we can look at the very creation, and it goes, there's no way this happened. That's a teleological argument. Another way to answer this question of where did we all come from, or where did everything come from, is process. Okay. It's the idea that even in 2021 here, this thing is in a process. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, if you believe in process, you are typically, it's one of the explanations that people have used using evolution, okay? There's atheistic evolution, some people have talked about. There's a newer thing called theistic evolution, the idea that God put everything in motion and then just left it, kind of like the watchmaker. But process usually involves evolutionary theory, that stuff is evolving, okay, and that's the idea of process. Now, that becomes a very important topic, even for some religious groups, namely Buddhism, Hinduism, because they take physical evolution and use it as the basis for evolving into godhood, because that's what the purpose of those religions will be. We'll see that. But biology is the basis for the spiritual evolution. The process sometimes is called the cyclical movement, because it just keeps going like this, and you can see I'm going through the same process, but I end up in a better position than I started. Okay, that's the idea of process. Now, in terms of looking at a group, and once we find out if they are design-driven or process-driven, then you get into other questions, like, is there somebody in control of this? Is there somebody who's calling the shots? Are there rules? So this here, the rule part, is going to be part of, has this God figure ever communicated with its creation? Because that becomes important. I need to know that. So other things you look at is the product and its designer. Dave sent me an email last week and asked me some questions about, there's a theology called open theism. Have any of you ever heard about it? Heard of it? Open theism basically says that God does not know the future until you and I do it, and then he takes all of that and pulls it into himself, and then he learns, and now he's better for us the next time. So it's the idea of God doesn't know the future, okay? And there's human reasons. We'll talk about this, I think, next week. There's human reasons why it's somewhat attractive. See, because you can go, well, why did God create everything if he knew it was going to be so much evil in the world? He didn't. See? There's some human attractiveness to it. Now, as soon as you do that, and we won't go into it tonight, there's 100 other problems it creates then. Okay? So it does matter where a group comes down in terms of what is the product that this God has maybe created versus are we just all in a kind of a cog in a wheel, okay, or a process, okay? So we'll look at these ideas in every one of the groups. Question?
Just so you're aware, there is a number 3, it was philosophy.
Oh,
Go back to that.
how did I miss it? Yeah, let's do that, because that is actually really important. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, that is actually a huge one. So philosophy is the study of the love of wisdom, okay? Wisdom is I'm speaking as a Christian now, wisdom is a God-designed and ordained thing, but like everything else that God has ever created, it can be perverted, it can be twisted from its original purpose. Okay? Remember, that's what that word means, perverted, to twist the original purpose. Okay? So wisdom can be godly, or wisdom can be ungodly and unbiblical. We looked at the verses a couple weeks ago. Don't be taken in by empty deception and philosophy and thoughts and knowledge according to this world, but take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. Okay? Because philosophy can go bad. Now, philosophy really, in the way we're going to use it, we're going to be asking questions. Let's see if we got them in there. No. You're asking, what is real? Okay? Now, let me show you why this is important. Remind me of your name again.
I'm not going to tell you. Wayne.
Okay. How many of you believe that I actually touched a Wayne when I slapped him in the leg there? Okay. Why? No. Why do you believe that I actually touched a? Yeah. Huh. Have you ever seen something that you thought you saw and you didn't see it? Well.
Wayne knows because he felt it.
Okay. Did he really feel it? Or, as the Hindus would say, he is feeling the effects of being stuck in this body, but he's actually not feeling it. Because this right here is not real. You think it, and you can hear it, but it's only a manifestation of that which is real. Okay? Okay. You'll have to deal with that if you ever sit down for coffee with somebody who's Hindu. That's what they believe. And the whole part of the religion is to get out of this physicalness. That's why we push for nirvana, or we push for Brahman, is actually what the Hindu said. I want to have my candle blown out so that I'm not struggling with the human frailty in the human body anymore. Okay? And the reason I'm stuck in that is because I believe this is real. Now, how many of you heard of Christian Science? Mary Baker Eddy. She believed the exact same thing. And she was laying in the hospital, bad, and she was in traction for her back, and she came to the realization, my back isn't really hurting. I just think it is. And so if you study Christian Science, you'll see the number one most important thing that I can do as a follower of Christian Science is knowledge. Because if I can think things away, I will be successful. Okay? Now, I have kids that were always active in sports, but they never would run marathons with me. Anybody can go out, well, most anybody can go out and run a mile, 2 miles, maybe 3 miles. But when you have to get up and get together with one of your training buddies, and I'm going to do 13.2 today. And then next Saturday, I got to add 3 miles to that, 16, and then 19. And 2 weeks before the marathon, I'm going to run a full marathon. That starts separating the men from the boys, so to speak. And most of it is right here. My kids, I'm a tough grandpa. Rainey will come to me, oh, Papa, I hurt myself. There's no blood. I need a Band-Aid. No, you don't. And guess what happens? Betty's watching. She goes to Grandma and she gets a Band-Aid. Weak-minded. Okay? Hinduism is driven by the goal of making my mind so strong that I can cease to exist. And therefore, I don't feel any of the pain and suffering of this world. Okay? So, philosophy is important. Now, Christianity. If I went back over there and I slapped Wayne again, I'd say, you know why you got those legs, Wayne? Because God gave them to you for a purpose. You need, part of your job here as a believer is to figure out what God has for that body of yours. So for Hinduism, they spend all of their time trying to rid themselves of this body. For us as believers, we do all we can to use this body to glorify the Father. Two radically different views of what is real. I believe this is real. I've paid for enough surgeries to know that this thing's real. Okay? Everything about my experience with it, everything you guys said. I heard something, I saw something. Wayne trying to be a smart aleck with me. You know, we went through all of that. Most of us believe that's real. That everything about it, the conversation, the touching, the physicalness, whatever, we believe it's real. Why? Because that has been part of our worldview since almost day one. Okay? So most of our worldview comes from our past, but it's always evolving in a sense. It can always grow. Okay, so let's go to ethics then. So who or what governs us? This can be religiously, this can be in a government. Some religions need governments. Other religions, in some ways, could care less about governments. Okay? But who or what governs us? Now, how do we know? So let's say, so in Buddhism, one of the huge rules is you should never get involved in somebody else's karma. Okay? How do we know that? This is what we call, and you'll hear this term a lot in the next 5-6 weeks. It's called epistemology. It's the study of how do we know something. Like, we could say, how do you know Karen loves you? And you hopefully would have a whole list of either things she does or says, the way she looks at you, the way she's committed herself for how many years?
61.
61. That is so awesome. That's longer than I've been alive. I'm just trying to cheer you up.
I'm feeling it too.
He's got reasons for his belief. That's epistemology. Okay? Now, epistemology is hard. It's not always as simple as that. Okay? So I'm going to play devil's advocate now, and I want you guys to answer me. How do you guys as Christians know what you should do and what you shouldn't do? Okay, you got conscience. How do you know? How do you know? Mm-hmm. How do you know that? I'm an atheist. I said I was playing the devil's advocate. So I'm an atheist. That is a bunch of bunk. So, okay, if I said to you, I know there's not a God, and you said to me, okay, but if you said, how do you know? And I said, well, I just know. Would you accept that?
He probably wouldn't.
No, I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about us. I'm the atheist. You guys are the Christians. In your view?
In the logical view, it can be whatever you want. Because I know
Okay, think about, oh, okay, you're saying,
what you said.
okay, not
How
what,
do you
okay,
know? And then, I'm an atheist, I know there's
Right.
not a God. Why?
Okay.
How do you know? Because I know.
okay.
That's the,
So how do you know what you just said?
that doesn't prove the argument.
No, I know it, but see, I'm not going to let her say it as an atheist. And you're not going to let me say that. This is an important issue. Because what I'm trying to show you is, as we get,
We can't say because we know.
because I just know. Well, how?
That's what I think.
What's the Bible? How do you know that's true?
Prophecies about it come true.
Faith. Faith. What do I have? What do I need to have? I believe in the scientific method. I believe in stuff I can touch.
Well, that's there.
That's what I believe.
Just happened that it's there.
Well, that's a different question. You just asked me what I believe. I believe in naturalism.
Seems to me you're missing one of the keys, which is I have a relationship. And I've been in that relationship, and so I've experienced that relationship. And when that person in the relationship tells me something that I couldn't possibly know, I have to make the decision. Have they been reliable in the past? If they have, then I believe them.
And you make that step based on,
The relationship.
but because you're doing what he's doing with Karen. Because she has shown me and said and done and made me feel, I then take, we'll go back to you. What you're doing is you're taking that step of faith.
So it's supernatural.
Oh, well, how do you know?
In other words, it's based on an experience that they had. So if somebody out of blue just said, I'm going to tell you something that you wouldn't possibly know,
Mm-hmm.
i.e. you reveal something that I can't know. The only basis I have is my experience with that person in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And if I deem that they've always been reliable, everything that they've said has been true, then why would I discount what they're telling me that I couldn't possibly know?
So, again, I'm still in the devil's advocate thing here. And by the way, I love this. I loved it when I was teaching. I miss it. So you can base all of your eternity on that metaphor, on that illustration. I don't have that much faith. This is epistemology. It can get really messy, especially if you're talking to somebody who believes some different stuff than you. Okay? That's all I'm trying to illustrate us and get us ready for. Because if you seriously engage this world the way I think that God calls us to in the scriptures, we should be sitting with Muslim people and sitting with Buddhists and Hindus, or even people that think they're Christians, and then if I talk with them long enough and ask them enough questions, I don't even know if they're biblical believers. Now, this brings up another issue. Do I sound judgmental? Okay. It's called discernment. Most of the people, when they start feeling uncomfortable about judging, if they know anything about it, they'll go to Matthew 7. Do not judge lest you be judged. Well, that's great. You got about 7 words of the Bible memorized. Do you know what the next 40 say? Take the log out of your own so that, you know what the rest says? I can more carefully remove the speck from their eye. Does not tell me not to evaluate. It says evaluate myself. Oh, okay, boom. Oh, man, That's amazing now. I can so much more gracefully help you get that speck out of your eye because I took the log out of mine. That's what this class is about. You may feel at times that maybe I'm a little mean or I'm kind of asking questions that maybe we shouldn't be asking in the church. You will get frustrated a little bit because you are learning and you're getting prepared to all of a sudden sit down with people that you may not be talking with now. Okay? That's what we should be doing. We should be talking to people. The Billy Graham Crusade said once that after a person comes to Christ, they typically have no non-Christian friends 5 years after they come to Christ. I don't know. I think that's probably changed a little bit because of our culture. But I do think that we tend not to engage the world because we don't know how to engage it. It's like, I don't do it anymore. I'm old. And when I could not play basketball to the level that I always played it, I walked away. I have refereed men's leagues. I have refereed church leagues and stuff, enough to know that is not basketball. Okay? I don't want anything to do with it anymore. Why? Because it's not being played the way it was meant to be played. And so I would say the Bible, we probably are living in the most illiterate time in terms of Scripture as any time in the history of the church. We just don't know Scripture. And so if you don't know the rules and the games of Scripture, then you don't play it. I would also say then, if you don't know the rules and have the skills to share your faith or to be an evangelist, if you don't have the skills and the rules and stuff, it's tough to play the game, so then we don't play it. That's just an observation I've watched over about the last 10 years. Less and less of us play that game outside of these walls. I think we have a lot of non-Christian friends, but I don't know if we know how to engage them for the glory of the kingdom. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So another important thing in ethics is this. Is what your God or your source, what it tells you, is it absolute or is it relative? Okay, for sake of time, absolute means for all people, all places, all time. That's characteristics of absolute truth. Okay, all people, all places, all time. Relative means it has a dynamic, a characteristic that it can change, and it changes relative to the situation or the people involved or the cost of something. Is it going to cost me much to step out here and do this, or is it just going to be no big deal, or is it going to cost me everything? That's what relative means, okay, relativism. And again, we come back to an epistemological question. How do you know? When we start talking about truth, if truth is truth, it matters. And if something is not true, it matters just as much. So we can't get away from doing epistemology anytime as we're sharing our faith. I have a good friend who I haven't seen for a while, but they are Jehovah's Witness. And when he says to me, I just love Jesus. Everything in me screams, well, you love a Jesus, but you don't love the biblical Jesus. In Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus did not die on a cross. He was impaled on a stake. But because you were cursed if you were impaled on a stake, it couldn't be Jesus. So Michael the archangel came to earth, took on a body and the name Jesus. And when they impaled him, he was gone. He was just using the body. Okay, it's called the God in a bod theory. Okay. So when I talk to my friend and he uses the name Jesus, because I've done study on what Jehovah's Witnesses mean when they say Jesus. In the beginning, here's the Bible. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jehovah's Witness. In the beginning was the Word was a God, and the Word was with God. Did you catch it? He was just a God. There is no Trinity. So this is the type of stuff that comes up when you and I engage the world and we sit with somebody and they say certain things and I go, okay, because I know that they believe this, I know to go this way. I don't just go, man, you're so stupid. Why? And this happens a lot. What happens? We're done. If you did that to me, well, I'm probably arrogant enough to keep going, but I should just say, we're done. You and I believe, need to earn the right to share Jesus. Jesus shares himself all over the world. I mean, you look at creation again. The very rocks will cry out if I tell these people to be quiet. But he calls you and I into this redemptive enterprise. And he says, I want you to be salt, light. I want you to be fragrant. Fragrant doesn't mean stinky. Fragrant is attractive. Okay? So God does give us guidelines on how you and I should walk out here and have conversations with people and love people. And I remember Christmas, I think it was Christmas Eve. Yeah, like a whole clan. There were some family, and then you had neighbors, right? No. Yeah, the two that sat on the end by Jamie. Okay, and I came over and I was trying to insult. It was his clothes, so it was okay. You guys know how he dresses. But I went back to Betty and I was like, that is so cool. That's their neighbors here on Christmas Eve with them. And I don't mean to pick you out, but you were there. It's a perfect illustration. There must be something about the Bobsts that their neighbors would want to come to Christmas Eve service with them. See, that's being a fragrance. That's being attractive. Now, we don't do anything to the message. That's just how we live and speak. And, so it's very important that we know stuff about the other groups so that when we have conversations, I can I can have two people from the same group, and I might go this way with this one and this way with this one because of who they are. And the only way I'm going to know that is if I spend time and earn the right to have, back to Todd's, to have that relationship with them, because that's going to in a sense, let me in. Now, let me say this to you. Do not use your relationship with someone as a get-out-of-jail-free card. And what I mean by that is, because I have relationships and I'm friends with people, does not mean I can become bullish. You can lay stuff out there and let them decide. Jesus did it all the time. He was, his master at it. And Jesus sometimes pushed people in the corners and stuff. But all sorts of people wanted to be around him. I can never figure out why the Pharisees ever came back once. You brood of vipers. You bloodsuckers. That's what okay? You whitewashed tombs. I mean, over and over. And even when he tells certain stories and they go, And the text says, oh, and the Pharisees knew he was talking about them. Why do you keep coming back? It's probably because of what, like Peter said, you're the only one that has the words of life. People will see that in us if they understand that we respect them enough to know something about their beliefs. It will open doors to that. All right, psychology. Okay, now we're mainly talking about humanity here. So when you're talking about the makeup, what are we? Okay, are we a clump of cells? Are we a special creation of God? Okay, are we just an animal that can be used for whoever's in power? See, what are we? Are we just flesh? Or do we have a soul? Do we have a spirit? Do we have intelligence? Are we different from other parts of the physical order or the creation from a Christian point of view? Do we have purpose? Now, I will say to you, highlight this. This is one of the things that I would say to you. And again, this ties in very much. When I was playing devil's advocate, I didn't like Todd. But I'm going to keep going back to that because that is one of the things that separates. This class, when I taught it at Minnehaha for 15 years, it was called The Uniqueness of Christianity. And that was one of the main issues. That there was a God who stepped into the natural world, created it and stepped into it to love me. But even more important than that he would let me know him. No other religious system or worldview has that in its story. Not one. Not one. Not even Judaism. God used certain things, we call them anthropomorphisms. It's where human characteristics of God came in. Well, the hand of God was over here, or the hand of God wrote on the wall, or like a mother hen, I'd love to have you guys all under my wings. Okay, those are anthropomorphisms. That's all we got in the Old Testament. Moses was the only one that got real close, and God had to hide him in a cliff so he couldn't see him. But in the New Testament, in the person of Jesus, we saw him. All the things you guys are talking about, we saw him, we touched him, we ate with him. We went to parties with him. We went to weddings with him. We went to funerals with him. Okay. No other religious system has that dynamic to it. Okay? The relationship part that God wanted with us, the covenant, gives you and I purpose. And part of the purpose is sitting down for coffee with people who are different than us and who believe different than us. And God then, in the idea of study of Scripture and discipleship and the Holy Spirit sanctifying us, all those things working together, we end up with knowledge and belief and wisdom and grace and mercy. And then we go out here and we get to share the greatest story in the world. That's what this does. That's part of our purpose. See? And my humanness is important in that because that's the way I do it. I'm not trying to get out of this thing, although I'm ready to go. I'm like you like, oh boy, we feel it, right? Even the very creation is groaning out for its creator, okay, the physicalness. But I find myself like Paul. For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. But it's better that I stay here and have fruitful ministry among you. But Jesus, if you want to take me, I'm ready. Okay, that's where we live. Now, another important, really important idea in all these worldviews is the human predicament. Another way to say this is, where does humanity find itself? Okay, is there a problem, or isn't there? Okay, things like that. Now, there's basically three views of this. The first one is, that we were created perfect. Sin happened. So now we need redemption. Okay? And then Christianity has the pieces to that. Perfect, sinful, I need redemption. And then another uniqueness, God did something. One of the things you'll see in every other group, I have to be doing. Christianity says, God looks at us and goes, Jeremiah 17:9, you dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrels, your hearts are deceitful above all things. You are so desperate, who can understand it? Well, I can. And I know how desperate you guys are. So I am going to pay the price to redeem you. Okay? That's called a linear view. And that'll come back up in history. But that's a linear view. There's a beginning, there's a whole series of events, and then there's an end. Okay? The next two, these are the process ones that build upon evolutionary theory. So the next one says, people are basically good, and I just try to be the best I can. The SH stands for secular humanism. Okay? That's atheism. That's all I got. No one created this, put it into order. There's nothing that separates you and me from animals, except power. That's why power is important in atheism and secular humanism and Marxism, all those. That's all I got. And then I die. Okay? Now, in Eastern mystic religions, it looks very similar, except it's all spiritual. Because the physical doesn't exist. So I'm basically good, but I'm stuck in this realm. So my whole goal is to get out, go to nirvana, cease to exist. Mormonism would say to evolve into godhood. As God was, we are. As God has become, we will become. Okay, that's the idea. So there's an evolution, but it's spiritual. It's not physical like the secular humanists. You know, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Confucius, although Confucius is really an ethical system, but it's cyclical. You know, so it's not linear. And most of these, well, secular humanism has an end, but Eastern mystics, this never ends. If you don't get it right here, you keep coming back. See? So, okay. Sin and salvation. Most groups, if I was teaching this 50 years ago, I might not say this, but I'll say it. I say it now, 50 years later. Almost every group has an idea of sin, but it's not like the biblical idea of sin. Okay? So, give you an example. The greatest sin in Buddhism is ignorance, and that's really the only sin, because ignorance keeps you here. Does that make sense? See, I have to keep gaining knowledge and master. This is not real. It's just a manifestation. See, and for most of you, you can't even process that I'm not hitting something. Okay. Because our worldview, since about the day we were born, has told us, especially when Dad spanked us, oh no, Dad's touching something. Okay? It doesn't mesh with our existence here. But if you come from a Hindu area, this makes sense that it's not there. You think it's there, it feels like it's there, but it's not. And if I don't train my mind to get out of this, which is ignorance, see, then I'm stuck. So most groups do have an idea of sin. We'll see this even with secular humanism and atheism. There is ideas of sin, not like ours, but there are ideas of sin. And then you have to start talking about, if you do have sin, how do you fix it? Is it knowledge? Is it I need redemption? Is it I have to do the 5 pillars? The Eightfold Path of Buddhism. It's just different things. So then we'll talk about in each one, if there is sin, there usually is a way of salvation to deal with it. Now you basically have 2 choices. If in your worldview you have sin, either you have to fix it, or the God figure has to fix it. So one is human-driven, it's works-driven, it's I have to do, okay? Now, and that's what most of our world is, that idea. I think at work, all of our work is all about doing, performing, results, okay? And it's hard for us most of the time to come into the church and shut that off. And depending on who has taught and helped you formulate your worldview, if they have told you that you have to make yourself worthy for God to love you, then it's all about me doing things to make God happy, okay? Or make him not to love me. I've said to my kids all their life, and I've watched it now for at least 32 years with my oldest, of saying, I can be upset with you over something. It has 0 to do with the way I love you. And they've heard this since day one. I don't ever want you to think you have to perform to win my love or my relationship. But most groups are human-driven. So it all hinges on, how'd you do today? See, I don't have a faith. I myself, talking to myself, I do not have enough faith to be in a works-driven religion. Okay? Because I can't, imagine this. There's a few groups out there that basically believe that we have angels that are keeping track of all of our good and all of our bad. And one day they'll be laid on the scales of justice, and you better pray that this goes this way. Okay? Now imagine that life for a moment. Did you sin today, Paul? Are you sure? How many times?
I didn't take
You didn't take count.
I counted.
You did. I believe her. But my point is this. Can you imagine trying to keep track? Because in a works-based religion, it's all on you. You will never stand before whatever kind of judge is in your worldview and go, I didn't know. Oh, yes, you did. You just didn't do well enough. It's on you. Okay? That's works-based. Grace-based is when you have, try to be fair, typically your authority figure will do something on your behalf to fix a problem. There's one story that does this. Jesus. Okay? You're dirty, rotten, filthy scoundrel, you can't fix yourself, I'm going to come fix you. It's over, it's done. Live free. That's it. But holy cow, have I met people in my 30 years of pastoring. And I say that to them, and they're like, yeah, but. No, there's no yeah, but. It's because the rest of our life creeps back in and says, well, wait a minute. Work, my wife, everybody has performance on their mind. There's no way God doesn't. Now, just think about this. Let's just say there's 10 worldview groups in this world. 9 of them have as their basis, if they have a eternal existence, They have as their basis, man, I better do it. And if I don't, I'm done. And we sit here with a story that says, you don't have to do that. We have a story that will set you free from that. Pardon me? Well, that's one of those groups that you would say, okay, sin for them. Well, let me use that question. Let me ask you guys. Just do like that. Just do a rewind and go through the political structure and comments and articles and everything you've seen in the last month. What is sin?
Not fulfilling the ideal that I have for society.
No. I think we talked about this the first week. Epiphenomenon, the result of? I think we did. So Christianity says this. If you take a group of good people and put them together, you'll have a good society. The community is a result of the people. That's what epiphenomenon means. It's a result of. Now, the group that Todd's talking about says this. If we want to create the right people, we have to put the right community together and then make the people behave in particular ways. Now, which one are you seeing right now? Which one did he just describe? It was the second. It was the second. That's why power in groups like secular humanism, Marxism, Leninism, even postmodernism for the most part, power and control is essential. Well, Jesus never looked for any of it. Everybody was mad at him because he wasn't taking on the Romans. My kingdom's not of this world. Well, yes, it is, but it's not. It's what we call the here but not yet, or the here and now, but not yet. Jesus said, the kingdom is upon you. What? No, it's not. The Romans are still in charge. Why? Because my world is a little bit different. It is both physical and spiritual. But what he was bringing right at that first time, man, was all spiritual. Because these guys had all the physical already. Okay? And you and I sit 2,000 years later and go, holy cow. Now, I know he's God, but Jesus was a genius. He knew exactly what they needed at a particular time. So epiphenomenon drives everything. And so creating that culture so that it creates a certain David Elliott, anything that gets in the way of that is the answer to your question.
Would it be fair to say that you're saying power and control is salvation for you?
No, I wouldn't say that, because this is a fallacy of, let's say, Marxism. Because you'll understand this more once we walk through it, but they would say to you, we're doing this for the people. Every Marxist regime has said that. Why? Because that was a tenet of Marx and Engels. This is all about the proletariat. This is not about the bourgeoisie. So the bourgeoisie, though, would say, oh, we're just doing this for the people. I'm hearing that other places, too. Because that's what power and control does. I have to get there, but once I get there, then I spend all my time trying to stay here. And the easiest way to do that is to say, I'm just all about you. Okay? So then, but the same sin, they wouldn't see sin as the same way. They would see it as, well, if you're not going to get on board with us, then we have to make you go away. That's to the tune of almost 200 million people in the 1900s. Between guys like Stalin and Lenin and Mao and Idi Amin and Hitler, and all of them use the same principles of you need to get on board with me or we'll replace you. So that's really your sin, is not supporting us.
There is no salvation.
Salvation is a culture.
But
Be-
it's only existence if you're talking about their society.
Yeah.
There's no salvation to it. They don't care what's going to happen to them when they die.
Well, but they would say this. It'd be like David. David's my buddy. I love, you don't have to stand up. I care what David thinks about me. Every time I see him at Hy-Vee, man, I go up, we're elbowing and we're talking, and people are asking me, how do you know David? And I say, well, he's my friend. We go to church together. Now, even if I was an atheist and David was my friend still, I would care if I'm good, whatever good is. I would still care what David thinks about me. And if he comes to my funeral, I would want him to stand at my casket and think good thoughts, and I'd really want him to miss me. That is part of my salvation when I don't have a salvation. It's what have I left in legacy. It's shallow, for especially the way you're shaking your head. And I would agree with you. But when that's all you have, that's all you have. Okay, let me package it another way. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Nobody comes to what? The Father, except, okay. Now, was he telling the truth? Would you? Would you stake your life on it? How do you know that that's truth? Okay, give me some more of that. I like that answer. Fill us in. She said because of evidence.
So I've done some studies by J. Warner Wallace, and he talks about the eyewitness accounts, that the Gospels are eyewitness accounts. And if you examine them like pieces of evidence in court, you see that they stand and that they're true.
Okay. What else?
All the historical documents and old manuscripts and the lack of errors compared to other historical documents that we say are reliable and true.
Do you guys know how many fragments or whole copies of the Gospels we have? 24,000 plus. 24,000 plus. Do you know how many copies we have of tetralogies? Who wrote that? Tetralogies. Roman guy. Ugh. Anyway, people think this is one of the most historical, reliable documents ever created. That we have 12 copies. There's 24,000 plus of the New Testament Gospels. You have to be a historical agnostic to believe the historicity of the tetralogies and reject the Gospels. People do it all the time. But I would say to you, I'd propose to you it's hypocritical. Because you're going, I believe tetralogies on the basis of evidence. But on the basis of 24,000 pieces of evidence, you're going to reject another document here. Okay? Now, if God really has done these things, and it's not up to us, again, I would say, you and I have the perfect solution to this world's problems. People are looking to get free. I have this conversation all the time. I love to talk. I'm out in the world. Yeah, I'm a pastor, but I own construction company, man. I get to talk to all sorts of people. people in power and control and people who aren't. And I tell you, if they could trade their stressful life to be free, they would. And you and I have the solution for them by what we believe and the way we live and what we can share with them. Ooh, man. All right, sociology. Sociology is the study of the community. Okay? And in it, the source typically is going to be that thing that tells us what to do. Be kind, be loving, do justice, be graceful, be merciful. Okay? That's what our source tells us. Okay? But in sociology, we're going to get into some of these worldviews that we go, is there any motivation for justice? Joseph Stalin. Joseph, do you really think you're doing justice? Okay, and I'm not talking about social justice. I'm talking about rightness and wrongness. The oughtness. Ought we do this? Okay. Do you really think that what you did, 25 million of your own Russians, that was just? Now, he probably would not use that word, but he would say, it was perfect for the movement. It was great for the proletariat. Which it wasn't, but that's what he would say. Necessary. Okay? He wouldn't call it evil, though. There's no, that's one of the things we'll see in ethics and things. What is your standard of evaluation? You know, we used to have a dress code at Minnehaha, and nobody enforced it except me. And they used to do all sorts of announcements and stuff, making fun of me because I would enforce dress codes and stuff. And but no one else would enforce them. So then the kids realize, well, so-and-so, I was in their class for 3 hours this morning. They didn't give me, well, I can't help if they don't obey the rules and do what's right. Well, that just gets me in trouble. So I decided I'm gonna force the issue. So on a chapel one day, I was talking and I said, I did a deal on crucifixion. And I just talked about crucifixion worked. Because I don't know if you knew this, but outside the 12 gates of Jerusalem, that's where they crucify people. So I'd be walking in with my son to go into Jerusalem. Son, look at that guy. And on the sign, see, that's what it tells me what they did. So Jesus was crucified because he claimed to be king of the Jews, which we already had one. So that was his crime. So on the sign, I'd say to my little boy, see what he did? That's why they're killing him. You better keep your nose clean. For the most part, it worked. So then I went into, I said, you know, as I studied for this passage, I realized we have a great opportunity to give our dress code some bite. I said, so what we should do is every year bring a brand new freshman in and bring him up on this stage and crucify him. And just say, if you break the dress code, that's what you get. Now, humanity's stupid enough. We'd probably have to kill 3 or 4 more before everybody got the, right? But crucifixion was a deterrent. It worked pretty well. Okay? But it wasn't just. Okay? What should a community look like? We would say it should look like the people that are in it. So therefore, that's why we want to invest in the individuals. We want to parent rightly. We want to grandparent rightly. We want to do rightly. Why? So everybody sees it and we form a nice community. Okay? Or should it just be, okay, here's what we are going to be about now. I'm the Meisterburger. No more toys in Toyland. Okay? all those things, different groups have different ways of doing it. It's the whole idea of who's going to govern us. We're going to govern ourselves, are we going to partly govern ourselves, or do we just have dictators? Politics kind of goes off of that. This is not about politics. This is about governance. Okay? So who's ruling us? Why are they ruling us? Did they overtake us? Did we vote them in? Were they such a nice person that we said, this is a person we want to lead us? Okay? What is the purpose of government? Every group's got a different purpose for it. Okay? And then what's the view of the ruling authorities? How many of you know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer was? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor, and he got arrested because he was part of a assassination plot against Adolf Hitler, and which was amazing because he was a pacifist. But his brother-in-law brought him a dossier of what Hitler had been doing in these camps and da-da-da, and he came down to, it would be more of a sin for me not to do something than to be involved in this. Well, it didn't work. It backfired. He ultimately got killed. And at one point, he gets interviewed over and over and over, but at one point, the guy that is interviewing him comes in with a Bible. A German Gestapo guy comes in with a Bible and basically says, doesn't it say in your book of Romans that you're supposed to obey all earthly authorities? See, they were trying to catch him. Corrie ten Boom, they were hiding Jews in her house. She's Dutch. And at one point, her dad finally said, you know what? We can no longer lie about hiding Jews in our house. Because what we're saying is, the only way God can work this out is if we lie. So he said, they made a decision as a family. When they come to the door now, we're going to tell them we have Jews. And I remember, I heard Corey tell this story down at Northrop Auditorium, probably back in the 80s. And she said, yep, they'd come to the door, and mom or dad would answer the door. You got any Jews in the house? Yep. Well, where are they? And she'd go, well, they're right there under the table. Well, there was a trap door underneath the rug under the table. And it got to the point that they thought they were crazy. And they began to leave them alone until somebody then turned them in, and they ultimately all got taken to the camps. But that's a whole different view of ruling authorities than Dietrich had. See? So everybody's got an idea. And if you don't, you should. You should work on that. Do study and try to figure out what you want to do with it. Law. Basically, you have law, natural law, which is earthly, and you have divine law, which is typically God. Okay? You have to decide which one's more important. Which one do you run on? What's the purpose of law? Every group's got a different, they end up with different laws because they believe law is purposeful in particular ways. And then, again, we have the question, who's making the rules? Why should we follow this guy and not this guy, or this group and not this group? Another area is economics. Give me just a couple minutes, we'll be done. We just got 2 screens left. Economics. Where do your resources come from? Did you work your butt off for them? Did you inherit them? Did they come from the man or the God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills? How you answer that question will drive how you use your money. Okay? How you answer that question will drive how you give to missions. How you answer that question will drive how tightly you hang on to your money when you lay down every night, or how much anxiety you have over it. Okay? Because if it's all on you, well, it's all on you. You better worry. See? Every answer, again, ideas always lead to consequences. So answers always lead to consequences. How am I supposed to use my resources? You know, Am I supposed to use them for myself? Am I supposed to use them for others? Am I supposed to hoard it for retirement? Am I supposed to give it away? I grew up really poor. My dad would spend basically about half of the year on unemployment. He was a construction worker. And back then, we didn't work in winters. And we had very little. I don't think I ever missed a meal, but I ate beans and cornbread 3-4 times a week. Okay? And I remember my dad would get his unemployment check, and they would come home, and him and mom would go into the bank, get it cashed, and they would go buy food for people that were poor. I mean, they'd buy bags of groceries and leave them on anonymously. They'd leave them on the thing and like ding-dong ditch, man. You know? That's why we could never sneak in the house at night. My folks were great at that stuff. But that's how I learned about money. So when I spent much of my pastoring years poor, it wasn't anything new. We still tried to give. Why? Because that was modeled. That was part of our worldview. Okay? And then the last one, history. Okay, this is the linear and cyclical again. There's basically, here's how people view history. There's a beginning, there's a series of purposeful events, there's an end. Okay? There's a beginning, there's a series of non-purposeful events. Okay? Now, I can try to give meaning and purpose to things, but I can't say that this thing has purpose and meaning. Okay? I can't say, in the first linear view, I can look at my mom and dad's death and go, man, also what's your purpose in that? I have told stories about my father and used stories about my folks, just like I did just now. In teaching and evangelism, purpose all over the place in their life and death. And I would say to you, mostly in their death. Because when we had their funerals, people lined up for 2.5 hours and told stories about my mom and dad that none of us kids knew, of things that they had done in people's lives. And we think about that all the time. One of my sisters had a stroke 2 weeks ago. And my ministry right now has been reminding all of us, guys, remember what mom and dad taught us. Okay? So that's a linear view. There's a beginning and an end. Cyclical, it's an endless series of cyclical, typically reincarnation. And they only end if you reach a nirvanic state or if you cease to exist. All right? And then and we'll just do this one. And then you have to ask other religion, is there a command to add people? Are we supposed to share? Not every group shares their story. You know, Branch Davidians shared it a little, but they were in a compound. Heaven's Gate, you guys remember that one? Hale-Bopp Comet, pink jumpsuits, $2.25 in their pocket, and they all committed suicide so they could get on the rocket with Jesus. Okay? They didn't really do any evangelism. Is there a judgment at the end? Or is it in the middle of your life? Is there a reward or punishment at the end? Or does that happen in the middle of your life? Who or what determines what you get? Okay? And then the last thing, which even the Christian church now, amazingly to me, is debating, is reward and punishment, is it eternal, or is just the reward eternal, and if you didn't make it, you get annihilated? Because that wouldn't be just. It wouldn't be loving. Okay? All right. Thanks for the extra minutes. Would you guys be interested in starting at 6:30 a little bit next week? You are welcome.